The Verdict, a Sidebar production, hosted by Kent Myers and Mick Cornett. As a part of its traditional and continuing commitment to public and community service, Crow & Dunlevy sponsors The Verdict. Also sponsored by Delta Dental, Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, and C.H. Guernsey & Company. Each week on The Verdict, we present an objective discussion of contemporary and legal issues, topical issues that will affect Oklahomans in their daily lives. The Verdict, a Sidebar production.
Welcome to The Verdict. I'm Kent Myers, and as you can see by the empty set, Mick Cornett is not here this week. But Mick promises me he'll be back next week, and we'll look forward to getting him back. The Verdict, as you viewers know, is primarily an educational show. But this is an election year in Oklahoma, and the election results have recently been the big stories. We want to talk this week about some interesting political characters we've had in Oklahoma in the past. We've had public officials that have had character, that have had quirky characteristics, and have just been basically characters. And we've got two people on this week that have covered them in the newspaper media for many, many years. Know the public officials well. They have opinions on the past performance of public officials, and have some views about who might be our new public officials. I think this will be an interesting show. It should be very, very enlightening with the upcoming general election. And so I want you to sit back and relax, try to get over Mick Cornett not being with us on this show, and enjoy our two guests. But now let's take a break, and pretty soon we'll be back to start our interesting discussion with our guests. Thanks.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all of the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. Oklahoma Lawyers for Children has over 350 of the best attorneys and volunteers in Oklahoma County who donate their time and services to represent children. For more information, call 405-23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
St. Gregory's University has been changing the lives of people like me for 125 years. Affordable, private Catholic education, balanced with dedication to community and service, makes St. Gregory special. We're extremely proud of our students' outstanding academic achievements and our nationally ranked athletic teams. It's when you help a student build a future of balance, integrity, and service that you change a life forever. St. Gregory's, a community for life.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
The Verdict is pleased to have as a sponsor C.H. Guernsey & Company, providing architectural and engineering services to clients throughout the U.S. and around the world.
Welcome back to The Verdict. I'm Kent Myers, flying solo today without Mick Cornett, but I hope we won't crash. We have a former Air Force lieutenant with us as one of our guests, and he'll try to keep us on an even flight path. Today we're going to be talking about politics in Oklahoma and politicians in Oklahoma, past and present. And we've got two veteran newspaper journalists with us to visit about this. They together have a total of about 85 years of newspaper journalism experience and have covered most of the interesting, quirky, and very competent public officials we've had in this state for a number of years. I'd like to introduce them to you now. On my immediate right across the table is Ed Montgomery. Ed is an Oklahoma native. He attended the University of Missouri and Muskogee Junior College. He's worked on newspapers in Oklahoma and Missouri for a long period of time, starting in 1940. Ed is my Air Force lieutenant that's going to keep us flying straight today. He is a World War II veteran, and he has served on the Daily Oklahoman's Capitol Bureau for a number of years, did serve in that capacity, and covered the legislature and politics for nearly half a century. He's currently a columnist for the Norman Transcript. Ed, thank you very much for joining us on The Verdict.
Glad to be here.
To Ed's right is Andy Rieger. Andy Rieger is a four-generation Oklahoman. He's worked for newspapers in this state and central Oklahoma and has taught journalism for approximately 25 years. He's currently the managing editor of the Norman Transcript. He holds bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of Oklahoma and has been a longtime friend of mine. Andy, thank you for coming.
Good to be here. You're so close. You're almost Greater Norman up here.
We are indeed, and we're pleased that you both could come up from Norman to join us. Ed, I want to start with you and ask you to think back over your career and tell us what is the story that you covered out of the thousands or hundreds of thousands that you remember the most.
Well, that's a pretty big assignment, but for probably the one that just came together better, in my opinion, and that probably got a better reaction from readers was the day about 1970, or the early Sunday morning when they blew down the old Huckins Hotel at Main and Broadway. It was in its day. It was the best hotel and the grandest hotel in town, and it was its walls were full of history. It was the place where Charles Haskell, the first governor, attached a note on the hotel stationery saying that he was hereby moving the state capital from Guthrie to Oklahoma City. Probably more deals were made there than there were more legislature deals than any place else in the first 20 years of statehood. It was also an important story because it was the beginning of a possibly ill-advised change in downtown Oklahoma City. And the first in Oklahoma where a building was demolished by strategically placing small explosive charges to bring down a big building. Patience Ladding, the mayor, gave the go-ahead signal, but I'd been there early talking to these experts. And so I could explain to people that knew even less about it than I did. And I wrote a story and a sidebar, and I worked in some history that I'd studied, and it's just the one I remember the best.
Thank you. Andy, what about you? What story do you remember the most, without regard to whether it has a lot of public significance or not?
I guess, Kent, I don't go quite as far back as Ed does, but I think it was 1981, and I was a young reporter on the Oklahoma City Times, which you recall is the afternoon edition of the
Yes.
Oklahoman. And I got a tip that the governor of Colorado was going to be in Oklahoma trying to figure out a way to move the Cowboy Hall of Fame from Oklahoma City to Denver is Governor Lamb. So I quick got on the phone and called limousine companies. I figured he'd fly in and get a limousine. I found out that they had rented a limousine, and then I tried to think of where you would take the governor of Colorado if you wanted to have him. So I went down to the Beacon Club and stood outside there and waited, and I had an almanac, and I looked at the picture of Governor Lamb, and I saw him walking out of the Beacon Club with Dean Crakel, who was the head of the Cowboy Hall of Fame, and I walked up to him and I identified myself, and I said, "Governor Lamb, why are you trying to take the Cowboy Hall of Fame?" And at that point, he made some quick comment and ran off, and I found a telephone and called the city desk and dictated a story for that afternoon's paper that the governor was in here. So, and after that, the Cowboy Hall of Fame got a lot of attention, a lot of
and didn't move.
Did not move, and so it was a good ploy on the part of the director there, I believe.
Thank you. Ed and Andy both, let me ask you to just kind of give me your list, as short as you can make it, of the best governors that we've had in Oklahoma. Give me 2 or 3 of the best ones you think we've had, Ed.
Well, I hate to compare them. Let me talk about the most interesting ones.
That's good.
The first one I ever covered was Henry Bellman in his first administration in 1963, and that may have colored my thinking some, because you always remember the first ones, but he was this wheat farmer, war hero from Noble County.
Billings.
He was a member of the Billings School Board and had been years before a one-term legislator, and that was all. And there had never been a Republican governor, and so he was first, and of course that made him a lot more interesting than he would. And of course he was a Republican with a highly, heavily Democratic legislature, but there was a limit on what he could do, but he probably did as good as anybody could have done. And then, of course, he was on his way to becoming a 2-term United States Senator, and then the people couldn't believe that he had quit after the Senate after two 6-year terms, and then come back and doggone if he didn't run for governor, and he won, and he was a lot different then, more self-assured, but he was still good, and he will always be remembered for passing the House Bill 1017,
helped education,
funding and improving education with almost no help from the members of his own party.
I have to break in right here. We need to take a little break. Thanks. We'll come back. We're visiting with Andy Rieger and Ed Montgomery right here on The Verdict. Now let's hear a word or two from our sponsor.
American Express Tax and Business Services. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. American Express Tax and Business Services. In Oklahoma City, the phone number is 405-843-5311.
I'd like to offer my most sincere congratulations to the firm of Crow & Dunlevy, the employees and attorneys, profound contributions to the state of Oklahoma for this past century, and I wish you well for this coming century. Thank you.
Happy anniversary, Crow Dunlevy, and thank you for 100 years of providing quality legal service to the state of Oklahoma. We wish you much continued success and growth.
We are C.H. Guernsey and Company. We provide engineering, architecture, and consulting services to clients across the nation and around the world. Our corporate headquarters are located in Oklahoma City, and we have branch offices across the country, including Tulsa. We have provided quality service to clients for nearly 75 years. At Guernsey, we believe in quality work and unconditional client satisfaction. To learn more about C.H. Guernsey and Company, log on to our website at chguernsey.com.
Bringing out the best in each student. That is the simple goal and tradition of Heritage Hall. The focus on the individual shapes the educational experience at Heritage Hall. Each student benefits from small classes, able, dedicated teachers, a solid academic curriculum, and exceptional co-curricular programs of athletics, arts, community service, and other activities, parental involvement, personalized counseling, and the development of responsibility, integrity, and love of learning. If you want education taught with pride, then you want Heritage Hall.
Welcome back to The Verdict. We are visiting with Andy Rieger and Ed Montgomery from the Norman Transcript on politicians past and present and what's going to happen in the future, and maybe a couple of other things as time permits. Andy, Ed was talking about a memorable governor that he remembers. Just very briefly, what are your reflections about that same thing?
I think, Kent, that George Nye's tenure as governor to me was always interesting because he presided over the state in really some boom years and some bust years, and he had to do that. And you have to remember Governor Nye's background as a disc jockey at Teen Town in Pittsburgh, and so he was always working the crowd, always getting that acceptance, and I think that kind of dominated his political life.
Pretty successful career.
Very much so. Yes.
Let me change subjects with you completely, but let's bring it to the present. The governor's race is hot and heavy here in Oklahoma, and now we finished the Democratic primary with Senator Brad Henry winning the runoff over Vince Orza. Were you surprised at that outcome?
A lot of people were surprised. I wasn't as much because if you looked at the other three Democrats in the race, meaning Senator Haney, Representative Dunnigan, and Mr. Lampkin, together, those men had about 55,000 votes, and two of them, Senator Haney and Mr. Dunnigan, had come out supporting Brad Henry. And so, we're journalists, but we can still do the math.
That's about the difference, I guess.
That's right, yeah, very much so. And in fact, if you look at the breakdown of the election, the runoff, Mr. Orza actually received about 20 to 30,000 fewer votes in the runoff than he did in the primary.
Well, what's Ed? Vince Orza has won 2 primaries and lost 2 runoffs. What's next for him? Can he still be active in the elective office field?
Well, I think so. But plenty of people have run for governor more than 2 times and won.
What do you see him doing in the future, if anything, politically?
I wouldn't be surprised if he wouldn't run for governor again. Apparently, that's where his interest lies.
Well, Andy, let me ask you. Barry Switzer had a very prominent role in Brad Henry's campaign. Some people have even coined the phrase that Orza was Switzered. What effect, if any, do you think actually on the voter, Barry Switzer being aligned with a particular candidate might have?
Barry Switzer is one of the most popular men in the state. I think there was some talk early on when Congressman Watts left that Switzer might run, similar to what Tom Osborne has done in Nebraska, to go up there. I think Coach Switzer raised a lot of money for Brad Henry and traveled with him and did some, many public appearances. I think it's a big factor in the race. He's come out very strongly for him. His appearance on TV the other night at the watch party, I mean, we weren't sure who the candidate was, Brad Henry or Coach Switzer.
Is there any danger of Henry becoming too dependent on Switzer?
I don't think so. I think Coach Switzer is so popular. Anytime he comes out on Owen Field, he gets a bigger hand than anyone. And I think that's a good measure of a public person's support.
Let's go back to the governor's race in general. We have, of course, now Steve Largent, the Republican, Brad Henry, the Democrat, and Gary Richardson, the Independent. Ed, who, as between the Democrat and the Republican, who benefits most or is hurt most about Richardson's being in the race?
I believe Henry benefits from it. If he hadn't, if one of the other candidates had won, a lot of Democrats who would ordinarily have voted Democrat would have voted for the Independent because of the lottery. Now there'll be some Republicans that will vote. More Democrats than Republicans are in favor of the lottery, but a lot of Republicans are too, and some of them are they wouldn't want to vote for a Democrat, but they wouldn't mind voting for an Independent who believed in something that they believe in as strong as they believe in the lottery.
Andy, how do you see that? And do you, let me ask you to comment on that, and then further, does Richardson have a legitimate opportunity to win outright?
It could happen. I think he may have peaked already. We see some signs of that. He's got 2 or 3 main issues. We talk in the newspaper business a lot about the Bubba factor. How much, how will it portray in rural Oklahoma or such. I think that he will get some support. Other states have elected independent governors. It's certainly not unheard of. I kind of agree with Ed that I think that he will pull from Mr. Largent in that. Although don't discount the Christian voter. I think that that's still a very strong presence, and they seem to be leaning now towards Mr. Largent.
Let me change the subject just a minute. Probably our final subject. There's been a lot of talk recently about the Board of Regents at the University of Oklahoma changing the name of the football stadium there to, I think I have it right, the Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium. Ed, how do you assess the controversy about that, and do you think that's something that's likely to be around for a while?
Oh, I don't think so. I think people still, nobody even really calls it the Memorial Stadium. Most everybody says Owen Field. And it's the thing that everybody's doing now, like naming the Oklahoma City ballpark after the telephone company. And if you're going to do that, then I believe in this case it's probably justified. After all, the donation was for the football stadium, and it still is the Memorial Stadium in Owen Field, and I think it's probably all right.
Andy, how do you see that?
Well, I think that it was probably inevitable in the budget times that the university operates in now. You're going to see more and more buildings and monuments not only being named but renamed, as is the case here. I think that the fallout from what's happened with it was not totally anticipated by the university. I think that they may have not prepared well enough or planned ahead on that. But, I think if you look around campus, look at all the buildings that are already named, the Lloyd Noble Center where the basketball center plays, the McCaslin Fieldhouse, the Gaylord family's contributions to the university are, far beyond the football stadium. I think President Boren said about $50 million worth of contributions, and that's very significant. I'm just happy, and I said this in a column in the newspaper, that the family has chosen to invest in next generations of Oklahomans.
Thanks. We've got a break right now. Time has run out on us. Thanks very much, Ed Montgomery, Andy Rieger, for being our guest today on The Verdict. Let's take a break, and then I'll be back.
I enrich our cultural landscape.
I help define our quality of life.
I am one of 4,000 artists in central Oklahoma who receive
support from Allied Arts, this community's united arts organization.
I am an Allied artist.
In Oklahoma, there are more than 1,600 children waiting to be adopted. They're of all ages, and for many, home has been a source of pain and conflict. They've dreamed of finding a better life and a loving family. Consider adoption. For more information, call 1-877-OK-SWIFT or visit the website www.okdhs.org. Adopt. It may be the toughest job you'll ever love.
We're back on The Verdict. We enjoyed very much having Andy Rieger and Ed Montgomery join us to discuss politicians past and present. I have one message for at least one member of our viewing audience, and that is Mick Cornett, hurry home. I'll be glad to have you back. I hope you've enjoyed hearing from the gentleman that we had on today. Vast newspaper experience, excellent reporters that are thoughtful and write what they find, and they search out the truth and report it to you. That's what The Verdict wants to try to do, is at least present interesting information for you about subjects that we think you're interested in, we hope you are, and perhaps make some of these subjects more interesting for you after you've had a chance to watch our show. I want to thank you for watching today. I want to thank particularly our sponsors that make this show possible. I want to make special thanks to Steve Easom, Mike Glover, and all the pros around me here at the studio that have allowed us to get through this show. And we hope you'll visit us on the Verdict website, which is www.theverdict.tv. Learn about what we're going to do in the future, what we've done in the past. If you have any comments, we'd love to have them. In any event, for Mick Cornett and myself, Kent Myers, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week on The Verdict.